Aloha mamas, and welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom Room. This show is brought to you by the Maui Mama magazine, and we are here for you, the Maui Mama, to help you to express and connect and to actually share all those things, those crazy things that are on our minds during this pandemic time. Our motto is #Share Aloha, not Corona. I'm Angeline Chu Longshore, and today we are talking about uncertainty. That's something that I have heard so many people talking about over and over as the cause of their anxiety. So I thought, okay, we've been in this pandemic time, or at least our awareness of it, for 6 months now. And, you know, our lives changed when we got that stay-at-home order. And so suddenly we're all faced with this length of time, the 6 months of uncertainty. And it's going to go on and on and on until we get maybe a treatment for the virus. But then there's still going to be uncertain things. So I thought, okay, I need to look at this uncertainty thing because it's such a thing for people. And uncertainty is actually the main root cause of pandemic anxiety. They're seeing that in studies. And you know what? It's actually not a physical threat. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So some of these studies talked about this inability to tolerate uncertainty. And they're studying that now because of the pandemic. I mean, they were studying it before, but now there really are a lot more studies about this intolerance to uncertainty. And so that is a thing now. So in this show, we're going to look at uncertainty and how we can help ourselves with different strategies and even one fun way to alleviate it. We're going to learn about dialectic behavior therapy with Dr. Lauren. We'll meet 2 medical professionals who work at Maui Memorial Hospital who use healing music for mind and body wellness. And we will have that little fun at the end using improv games to help build up a tolerance for uncertainty. This is an actual thing that has been studied, building up tolerance to uncertainty through improv. So for our Actions of Aloha segment, I want to recognize the doctor and the nurse that we're talking to because they are a representative of all of our frontline workers who are day in and day out in the thick of things. And then these 2 also have been providing this free music healing through their YouTube channel and on their website. So we'll hear more about that in the show. So now for our first guest, Dr. Lauren Ampolos is going to tell us about this therapy. It's used for people who have more heightened emotions when reacting to very emotional situations, which actually is all of us right now. So let's welcome Dr. Lauren into the Zoom room. Hi, Dr. Lauren. Welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom room.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to you about this topic of uncertainty and how we can deal with it. But first, introduce yourself to us. Let us know what you do.
Sure, thanks. I'm Dr. Lauren Ampolos. I'm the clinical director at Illuminate Wellness, and we offer a variety of outpatient mental and functional health services to the community.
We're talking about uncertainty because that is something that I've heard over and over and over. A lot of people having that, I guess it's anxiety. It's not really fear of it's just anxiety about we don't know what's going to happen with our, I guess, school, with our work, with getting sick or not, or, you know, at this moment, my husband is quarantining because we're not sure if he's sick. So, you know, we're all in this sort of uncertainty. And so I had come across this technique that you have. It's part of cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy. And so tell us about this dialectical behavior therapy and how it could help us with this uncertainty anxiety.
Yeah, well, you're so right. I mean, so many people now are coming into therapy and they have just no idea what's going on. And that's such an uncomfortable place to be. And so we are using dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, a lot. And you're exactly right. It is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. But the really cool part about DBT is the creator, Marsha Linehan, she had gone through CBT, and she said there's a relentless focus on change, change, change. And we can't always change things, right? Like, we could change the coronavirus, we would just wipe it away and we can all start school and go back to our normal life, right? So dialectical behavior therapy actually weaves in mindfulness and acceptance. And so that, I think, can really support people in times of uncertainty, because we're trying to balance, acceptance and change together. Like, yes, we want to make change, and certainly there are things we can do. We can wash our hands, we can isolate, and, make sure we're taking good care of ourselves, but we can't get rid of the virus, right? And so we also have to practice this concept of radical acceptance, this total and complete acceptance. It's almost a surrender of sorts, right? Where I said, well, we can't change, so let's accept. And that can actually bring down the discomfort that's associated with the uncertainty and fear. It doesn't take away the uncertainty or fear. We still don't know what's going to happen, but we can feel a little bit more comforted in that space.
That's the thing that I think is what people wrestle with, is they think that, well, for one, we know that this is probably going to go on for a while. So it's this length of time. And then it seems that people think that they're supposed to not be have that discomfort. They're supposed to sail through like a champion and just be like, I'm fine. And I don't know why we think that. I don't know why we think that we're supposed to not have fear, worry, anxiety, and discomfort when we're in a pandemic.
I think that we're almost programmed to believe that we're supposed to have this happy, perfect life that is devoid of suffering. And even coronavirus or not, that's not the case, right? We've always got stuff going on, suffering going on. And that's kind of the beauty of this, treatment modality, is that it doesn't say we can't suffer. It says that when we suffer, how can we make it as doable as possible? How can we work through the moment? How can we still have a meaningful, loving and peaceful life, even if there is discomfort? Yeah, I think we're definitely led to believe that we're supposed to have these, happy, perfect, Instagrammable lives. And actually make a joke with some of my patients. We have like a #not-epic joke, because like so much of life is just like not epic. It's just like, we're in, the thick of it. And yeah, there's actually this really amazing book by Russ Harris called The Happiness Trap. And it weaves in acceptance and commitment therapy, which I talk about as DBT's kind of less structured friend, but still like the same content. They came out around the same time in a response to CBT being just so change focused. And it's such a beautiful book, The Happiness Trap. Like, we get stuck in this trap, this idea that we're supposed to be perpetually happy, when the reality is nothing of the sort. And I think once people start to practice, acceptance around that, it just makes it so much easier to work with the ups and downs that life inevitably brings.
I'm just wondering if after acceptance, we can say, actually, this pandemic is bringing us some really amazingly positive things that we would have never had before. We're examining our lives in different ways, and spending more time in a different way with our families if we have families. And, I think there's a lot of positives. We're re-examining our food system, and where we're getting our food from. People are building their own gardens, and I guess the first thing you're saying is acceptance. And I love that.
Yeah, well, and in dialectical behavior therapy, it's all about the balance between two opposing forces. And so we can't have acceptance without change, and we can't have change without acceptance and have it work well. And so it's really about bringing that balance in with the two. Like, where do you have power? Where can you make change versus what must be accepted because change isn't possible, right?
Mm-hmm. So there's one arm that I think is really interesting called emotional regulation. And why I thought this was so interesting is because there's a lot of patients, and you can tell us more clearly, that come to this type of therapy because they have really heightened situations, heightened emotions. So now that we are in this heightened situation, we all kind of could utilize this. So tell us about that. What kind of people typically use this, and then about emotional regulation?
Yeah, so emotion regulation is something that I think is now being taught to children at such an early age. We're really, focusing on emotion, and it's beautiful. But a lot of people, in our generation, they didn't get that, emotional training. We were told, oh, you're crying, go to your room, right? Or you're not allowed to be angry. So things are different now, I think, for a lot of children, which is beautiful. But a lot of us are having to learn, what emotion are we even feeling, right? We exile certain emotions. We kind of push them away, like shame, such an uncomfortable emotion. Anxiety, such an uncomfortable emotion. And we actually do a really great job a lot of the time at saying, no, I don't want to feel this. I just want to feel happy. And I think one thing that this whole, coronavirus slowdown has brought is a little bit of discomfort, because we're not able to engage in those same distractions that we normally do. And so all of those emotions are kind of coming up, and we don't have our normal, oh, I'm going to go to work and do all this stuff, or I'm going to go to all these parties and I'm going to hang out with all these people. It's like, oh man, I have to sit with myself. And that means that I'm maybe more aware of some of this discomfort that's arising. But when we don't have a label for that discomfort, it can be really challenging. And so emotion regulation helps us understand, what emotion am I feeling and what do I do with it? Sometimes we have emotions and they don't fit the facts of a situation, right? Or they're not effective to act on. I can feel angry out in the community because someone, cut me off or took the shopping cart I was aiming for, or whatever it is that we get frustrated about. And I'm not going to act on that, right? I'll say, oh, I'm going to just, slow down and not drive near this person, or I'm going to just grab the other thing, right? So sometimes we have to really regulate that. And so emotion regulation helps us understand, do I want to act on the emotion or not? Well, first, what emotion am I feeling? And then, is it healthy? Is it effective to act on? Sometimes we don't act on our emotions. Sometimes we're feeling all of this anger or frustration, maybe with one of our loved ones, and we actually want to speak up in a healthy way and say, hey, when that happened, I didn't really appreciate that. I wonder if we can do it a little bit differently next time. But sometimes we stay quiet and then we bottle in all of our emotions. And so really this modality helps us understand how to work with our emotions in a healthy way, when to say, anger, let's just slow down, or anxiety, it's okay, we're safe, or hey, let's actually address this issue. And so that's one part of emotion regulation. And then another part is, how do I reduce my vulnerability to my emotional experience, right? Because sometimes I like to, use the bucket metaphor, like our bucket is just full. And how can we reduce some of that so that we're not overflowing with emotion when challenging things happen? Because like we were talking about, challenging things just kind of happen. That's life. And so how can we keep our bucket as low as possible so we're not spilling over? And so when we're talking about reducing vulnerability, we're talking about making sure that we're engaging in pleasant activities, that we're scheduling in things that bring us joy and happiness. And I remember in my group at the beginning of coronavirus going through this module and saying, oh no, we're going to be talking about these things and there's going to be activities that are not accessible. And I was so pleasantly surprised that there's so much we can do just in our own space, or even just in our own minds. There are accessible, pleasant activities. They might look a little bit different than what we're used to, but they are there for us. And so the pleasant activities, living life in line with your values, what's important to you, and how do you take steps to make sure that you're doing something, a little bit of something, setting some goals so that you're on that path. And so an example of that would be, I value my relationship with my children, right? And then, okay, well, how can I do something every day that helps me build connection? Right. And then also focusing on building mastery of something. And so how do I do something each day or, every few days that helps me feel like I've accomplished something? Sometimes that's just making the bed or getting in a shower, right? And that's totally fine. Make it, challenging for us, but not so challenging that we fail. Sometimes it's learning to play an instrument or a new language, right? Whatever it is, meet yourself where you're at and do something that helps you feel a sense of accomplishment. Another tool is coping ahead. And so anticipating some challenges that might arise. I'm sure that a lot of the mamas are doing that as school approaches, right? Anticipating what might be coming up and then how you want to work with it in the most healthy and effective way possible. And then lastly, they're called the please skills. It's about addressing the physical components of yourself in order to, again, reduce that vulnerability. If you haven't slept well, if you haven't eaten well, if you haven't exercised in a way that is healthy for you, right? Over-exercise can be a stressor too. So in a really balanced way. Yeah. So, doing those things to really help support your mind and body can help you, feel less at the whim of those uncomfortable emotions that arise.
Mm-hmm. These are such great techniques that I'm thinking if we, instead of letting our mind go to those places that they go to, we can be proactive and say, okay, I'm going to do these things and really take my awareness and become self-aware. Because I think if we can shift that to a self-awareness of not just letting our minds, I guess they call it the monkey mind, run free. But when we find that happening, to go, okay, I remember Dr. Lauren, she was saying, let's do these things. And you can even have that list of like, okay, these are the things that I'm going to do when that happens, or to kind of proactively prepare for those anxiety moments. And then I think that's a way to like just protect ourselves. I mean, if we're thinking we have to protect against the coronavirus, well, we do emotionally too. So this is like part of our health protocol, in a sense. I think of it as like, how can I really, beef up my immune system and my mental health so that my entire self is healthy. One last thing that I have a question about is, so can parents do something with the DBT technique for their children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. And I think, like I said, a lot of parents are probably already doing this intuitively, but really supporting acceptance and change. So talking to your kiddos about this, right? Like, where do we have power? What can we do? And where can we practice acceptance, right? Sometimes the environment is more powerful than we are. And so how can we work with that? So talking to kids, in age appropriate language about, this concept of balancing, where do you have power, and we do have power to accept, right? So where do we have power to accept, where do we have power to change? And then also just helping to identify emotions. There's so many beautiful books on the market, but even if you can just say like, labeling the emotions like, oh, you're feeling angry, or oh, you're feeling uncertain, and validating that. A lot of the teens that we're working with now, my heart breaks for them because they have these plans. They're always told you, you're going to go to college and you're going to have all this fun and you're going to do all these things and you're going to have, this beautiful future ahead of you. And I'm sure they still do. But at this point, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck at home. And so really just validating that, right? Finding the truth in that and letting them know like, yes, this is so frustrating, or this is so anxiety producing, and not trying to make it better.
Is there anything else that you think is important for people to know for themselves or their children about dealing with uncertainty in general? I know we talked about the dialectical behavior therapy, but anything else?
I think just remembering that we are so resilient and we are so powerful, and just to, hang on for the ride. We're going to get through this, and we have such a strong community, and there's so many beautiful things happening despite, some of the tragedy and the crisis. And I think just to, hang on and support each other, continue doing what we're doing. I think we're going to be okay.
I like that. That vision of we're going to be okay, and the resilience, because we're strong and we're strong together. And people like you coming forward to just walk us through, help us out is really, it's a gift. I think this pandemic has brought this show out to happen. And then we're meeting people like you, and, we can utilize all these things even post-pandemic. So thank you so much. Thanks for being here. So where are you now going to be Zooming off to?
Well, believe it or not, I'm Zooming off to Zoom. I'm headed to the clinic, and I'll be Zooming all day. And so, we got to Zoom.
I guess that's the great thing, the telehealth type Zoom possibility. Well, thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you as well.
We'll see you again sometime.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so what is so cool about that is we can use all these techniques during this pandemic and even after it's gone. Let's hope that's soon. Okay, for our next guests, we're meeting the doctor and the nurse who are in the thick of things at Maui Memorial Hospital. They've been helping our community while still providing this free healing service, essentially music as medicine. Welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom room.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate you guys being here. I know you are such busy people doing amazing things in the community. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Okay. I'm Rasa Priya. I'm a respiratory therapist for the hospital here on Maui. I also do music, and Sarah and I are the proud parents of our 4-year-old son who just started school yesterday. So we've been experiencing that and feel good about all that. Yeah. How about you, babe?
My name is Sarah Sparkles Thom. I am an ICU nurse at the hospital in Maui, and I am also the owner of Maui Sound Healing with my husband.
Well,
and
awesome.
Yeah, the 4-year-old is also mine.
Yay! So both of you work in the hospital. And so I think people are probably going to go, okay, well, what can you tell us? Because we hardly ever get contact with people in the hospital. What should we know as parents, as Maui community people? What's happening right now? Is there anything that you would want to tell us?
Yeah. Well, right now in the hospital itself, we're doing pretty well. We're not having a lot of critical cases come through. And actually, as far as hospitalizations, our numbers for the coronavirus are minimal.
In Maui.
In Maui. Now we do know that the amount of cases on Maui has increased, as well as Oahu, especially Oahu.
Right.
But as far as what's coming through the hospital, not so much so far. So I would say Maui is doing pretty good, and some of the things that we can do to maintain that is basically social distancing and the mask thing. And I know there's a lot of controversial information, and it's really inconvenient. It's very difficult, especially for the kids and everything. But if somehow we can just try to honor that for now, that will be helpful. That would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just have that aloha spirit for each other.
Yeah, and I think because we've had that, overall, Maui is doing really well compared to the nation. So
I think that is what is keeping us more safe than anything, is just that caring spirit, that aloha spirit.
I notice on the mainland there's a lot of self-interest, and rightly so. People are concerned about themselves, their own families. But I think Maui extends that vision, and not only to ourselves, but to each other in our community and our kapuna. We really honor each other. So I think that's really translating into how we go about things in our actions. And it's been very, very wonderful.
So we're talking about uncertainty, and this is the theme of the show. And so I was just thinking about the things that cause uncertainty is that fear of the unknown, and that causes anxiety. And so with your sound healing, your music, tell us how that can be utilized to really help us in our well-being and that feeling of uncertainty.
Okay, that's a great question. That uncertain place, well, let me back up a second. For most of us in our present life, we have routines. We have things that we associate with that give us a sense of identity and purpose. Maybe it's our job, the structures that we implement, etc. But it's interesting, there's a gentleman out there named Eckhart Tolle. Have you heard of him before?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, what he talks about is being mindful and in the present moment. And he expresses that it's that state of being that really allows you to be clear and effective no matter what's occurring. He encourages removing the filters that's in our mind and just really focusing on what is actually happening in the moment. And I remember thinking about when he mentioned that, and I thought about like our little son, Teo. Now, Teo doesn't have reference to all this stuff. He doesn't know what COVID is. He doesn't know anything. So when I ask him to put on a mask, he's like, okay. He doesn't have the stigma that maybe we do. It's our right, et cetera, or whatever it is, but he is okay with things. So that makes me curious. Here's a little guy who's experiencing joy, and he just doesn't have all these things to think about. So that's quite something. So the direct question was, with our music, what does that do? Well, with uncertainty, we actually try to help people get out of that mental state. The uncertain part is, well, this news report said this, and here's a conflicting report. Where do we stand? What should I do? How should I approach my day? But with our music, I think we just try to take a person out of that mental jargon and really have them focus on being in the moment, relaxing, settling the body. And we know that when we work at the hospital, we know the effects of sound therapy in the hospital. It's been proven. They're doing constant research. One of the things that it does, it increases the interleukin-1 levels, which is an immune index. It also increases the immunoglobulin levels, which also help in our immune system. There's a scientist out there, a Japanese scientist named Masaru Emoto, and he does water crystal formation studies in sound. How does sound affect these water crystals? And our bodies are made mostly of water. And he's shown that certain frequencies, certain vibrations influence the structure.
I did a show for Lifetime Television on music as medicine. So I know that there are numerous studies. I mean, this is science. People may think, oh, that sounds like it's I don't know, woo-woo or something like that. It's actually real science that it does affect our cellular, and they're using it for cancer patients. And I mean, it's real science. So I know, it works on, you were saying it works on the body and then it works on the mind. So there's the two places that we know we need to work on. And I was talking about this with Lauren. I interviewed her just a little bit ago, and she, Lauren Ampolos, the psychologist, and she was saying that, being proactive with the mind and the body, it's a together thing. When we're talking about looking at protecting ourselves against the coronavirus, it's not just medicine, it's not just vaccine. We can actually do something before that even happens.
Yes.
And we may not even have to go there, because if we are healthy and we're strong, then we may not even get sick. So, so taking care of our mind and our body are two things that we want to do together. And the music does both, which is really amazing. And also it's fun. So I think that's another thing, is like looking at what we can do that's proactive and we can enjoy it, so we don't see it as work.
Really, our sound healing is designed for all kinds of healing. And it's basically based on the principles that I expressed earlier about relaxing. We know that stress is a super influential part of our human character that can really be a detriment to our physical disposition. It affects us in so many ways. Stress is probably one of the highest things. It gives us heart attacks. It just causes all kinds of ill effects. It affects our immunity system. So when we do sound healing, it's specifically to address that relationship, which could be translated into any type of medical disease or psychological disposition, something that's not wanted.
When I was listening to the music on your webpage and on your YouTube page, I could feel I felt like literally my back cracked the first few seconds, and I felt like almost an alignment of my spine with just the music. Like I was just listening to it on my computer. I didn't have headphones or anything. So, and I felt like this feeling come over me as if it were like a chemical shift. And maybe I'm really sensitive, and that's a good thing. But is there something on a cellular level that physically changes? Because I felt something.
Okay, well, this is kind of like not a hidden secret, but it's something that we actually don't speak about very. Do you want to say something, then?
I'm okay.
Okay, it's something that we don't speak about very often, but the way we approached our sound healing had a lot of intention. It wasn't just putting together some bowls and some gongs and making beautiful music, which would also be healing, but we were methodical in our approach. So like we mentioned earlier, Sarah and I both work in the hospital. I've been doing respiratory therapy for over 30 years, and I know the Western world. My passion, my heart is in the Eastern spiritualism. I stayed in India, where I learned kirtan, I learned chanting, and from some of those practices, I really found that sound is on a whole other level. We're talking cellular, but also spiritual. Like, to give you an example, when we're chanting mantra, the way that our mouths form these sounds, maybe our tongue is touching the roof of our mouth, and we're breathing in a certain way and producing sound. All those things are very specific towards wellness. They're not random. Even the way that the sounds are produced are carefully constructed and helpful in that way. So again, when we went to develop our sound healing, we had that in mind. We were thinking, how can we help people and be non-denominational? Maybe some people don't even have any experience with meditation whatsoever, but how can we be of service to a wide population? And this is what we've come up with. So we do integrate mantra, chanting, sometimes binaural beats, which is a technology coming out, isochronic tones, which is also a new thing coming out for post-traumatic stress disorder, something called neuroplasticity, which is helping to reroute and create neural pathways away from the traumatic experiences. So the music itself also assists in creating those new neural pathways.
I think a lot of times people think, oh, there's all these things and they sound so out there, because, who knows who's watching? I mean, the people that are watching this, right. You out there, maybe you've never heard of these things, but these are scientific things that have been proven. And now you say there's these advances in those, and they're finding these different pieces of that research is connecting music to how our brain works and how it affects our body.
Yes.
And our cells and our new neuroplasticity, which is how we can change actually our brain. It can grow and shift and change, you know, with all of these different things that are happening with music and other modalities that you talked about. So, you know, we're in a time where we're advancing so much, and our spiritual, which is, you know, some people think of that as religious, but it's really, you know, the part of us that is not the material body, the consciousness, all of that is affected by the pandemic, about anxiety, uncertainty, all of this that people are feeling. And so we want to address all of that. And so that's why I'm so glad that you're here talking about this, because I know sometimes when people talk about spirituality, they think, oh, that's so out there. But actually, it is what is the thing that's being affected so much right now is our consciousness, our conscious mind, our conscious being. And that's what's rattling us. That's what's making us feel that uncertain anxiety. So, you know, the fact that you're addressing all of this to this audience that may not have heard any of this before, it can really open up their minds to something that they haven't considered. And what better way to do that than something so enjoyable and easy as music? I mean, to me, that's just like, you know, there's no pill, there's no workout, there's no, you know, we don't have to do anything harsh or take an injection. It's pleasant. And you're saying it's free. I mean, you have this public service that's on your website and YouTube videos that's free. So are there specific instruments that hit different parts of the body, or
those who do chakra work, they use different notes to help create balance in those systems.
Chakra is like I think a way of saying like the energy center in certain parts of the body. So the throat, the lower back, the crown of the head.
Oh, and just to integrate the two ideas, what I thought was interesting about the chakra system is that it's in alignment with the endocrine system also. And we know that the endocrine glands, they govern systems and functions in body. So that's really interesting how those two are in alignment. And you also mentioned something about, you know, what can we give to those out there who have no exposure to any of this? Maybe it sounds a little new agey, but one thing is this. Anything that you can do to develop the right brain, okay? You know, most of us are left-brained. We calculate. We need that kind of black and white thinking. You know, 1 + 1 = 2. But if we can cultivate right brain activity, that will help us with our intuition, the unknown, that stuff that can't be seen, just to have a sense about things. And it can be drumming. It doesn't have to be good drumming. It doesn't have to be perfect timing. It's just you can grab a piece of Tupperware and just kind of do it. But by doing those things or any kind of art, that helps to develop that other side of the brain, which can be very, very powerful. You know, Sarah and I, we work in the intensive care unit, and sometimes in the COVID unit itself, and we have a new son. So when we were first going into this, there was a lot of unknowns, and you know, we didn't know if we were prepared at the hospital. You know, we knew that they wanted to do the right thing, but we didn't have access to all the information. So we had some fear. And I remember in the very beginning, us feeling stressed. You know, we were scared, nervous. We have a new son. How is this going to affect our whole thing? You know, and I think by these tools, it helped us to be able to navigate through this. And I could say for myself, you know, I'm not a perfect person and I have my moments, but I think overall, I think I've been pretty good as far as being steady and open and not shut down and not just in fear mode. You know, I've actually felt pretty good and encouraged. I feel like a greater sense of service right now, where I just want to be helpful and I don't have to know what's what. You know, we're talking about the unknown. I find for myself, because it's, to me, I feel like I can't know what is. There's just too much out there, and it's all, you know, valid, and there's good points on both sides of the argument, no matter what the argument is. And so how can I exist in that with those dynamics? And I think it's through these methodologies, through music, through meditation, through chanting, through, trying to get into that space where it isn't known.
This is actually an opportunity for all of us worldwide to take this opportunity to kind of get comfortable with the unknown and uncertain.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Play and try things things that you haven't before, like music as medicine, sound healing. Why not? Because what we're seeing, what we did before, being on that treadmill of life, doing, was where we were. And people are now, when they're at home with their families, they're like, this actually feels good. And so we're realizing there's a lot of things that we didn't know that we could be doing. They were there. We just didn't know. So I feel like this is an opportunity. Do you see that? I mean, you're amongst a lot.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. We definitely see that. And at the same time, we see a lot of our friends really struggling with that, and it looks like to me that most of the struggle is caused from the mind, like, how am I supposed to think? Do I wear a mask? Don't know wear a mask. This study says this organization says that. And when the mind engages in such, when it's all over the place like that, it doesn't feel very good. So for me, I actually tried not to think very much, and I want to be responsible and pay attention and do what I need to do, so I don't turn my back on that kind of stuff. But I don't overly associate it and get fixated. And for me, I love going on the lanai, looking out into the green and just breathing and try to really feel it. And at times when Corona was when it was peaking, some of the information was peaking, people were really scared. I did that, and I would just remember, gosh, this feels beautiful. I know the world's on fire, but I feel so good right now, even in this moment. So, yeah.
Yeah, because both of you are in the hospital, and I mean, literally exposed more than anybody else to actual patients. And here you are sitting healthy. I'm seeing you healthy, happy, peaceful, and optimistic. I think we can learn a lot from you both.
Start small if it's coloring. If you're a mom and you're about to just put some headphones on and color in a book, like really just do something to not be in that mental mindset. Make it hard to continue to be in a mental mindset of anxiety.
Where are you zooming off to now?
Well, we're going to do our next Facebook Live event on Tuesday, September what time?
September 1st. So we're going to kind of get ready for that.
Yeah,
fun.
We put a lot of time and preparation to see, and we're kind of going with the moment as well. But yeah, we're going to prepare for that moment. We're doing some stuff on Instagram to really help illuminate some of these tools that can be helpful. So that's some of this stuff.
Okay, well, I will get all those links from you and make sure to put them down in the show notes on the Maui Mama Facebook page. So thanks so much and enjoy your day.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Okay.
Have a beautiful day. Aloha.
Okay, I am definitely talking to those wise ones again. Such a wealth of knowledge, right? And, I realized that we don't have access to people like that normally to get answers to our questions. I see people in the Maui Mommies group asking each other all these questions, and how are we to know? So I thought maybe, I'll just put a post up and look for that in the Maui Mommies main Facebook group of your questions. You can put down your questions that you have for these two who work in the hospital, who see firsthand what's happening and who know exactly what we need to be doing. So look for that. And now for a little bit of fun, let's go to a fun segment. I know normally we don't think of uncertainty in correlation with fun, but here's why I came up with this. I found this article by Dr. Clay Drinko, and it is how improv can help us with this intolerance of uncertainty. And how this came about for me was I was thinking, I used to do improv. And so it helped me to get used to the unknown. When you're on stage doing improv performance, you don't know what's going to happen next. And you need to not know what's happening next, stay in the present tense, and really engage with the other person on stage. And that's what causes the performance to be interesting and fun. So when I thought about that, I searched for any studies that might be using improv for helping with uncertainty. And there was a study that was just published in February 2020, so just before the pandemic. And so this is something that Dr. Clay Drinko had written about. And so I have him and his 3-year-old daughter, Ella, waiting for us in the Zoom room. Hi, Clay. Welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom room.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thanks. You're coming all the way from New York to us. So thanks for being here. Can you introduce yourself to us and tell us what you do?
Absolutely. My name is Clay Drinko. I am, they say, an improv expert. I wrote an academic book on some of the benefits of doing theatrical improvisation, and I now write for Psychology Today and have a book coming out with Simon & Schuster in January about exercises you can do every day to experience some of those benefits of improvisation in helping you feel less in your head, less worried about the future, and just more happy and comfortable in the present moment.
Well, I came across your article in Psychology Today, and I had already been thinking about uncertainty, as we all are, but I also had been thinking about how uncertainty is really the unknown. And most people are uncomfortable about being or thinking or wondering about the unknown in general. And so, just going to fix my microphone there. and so I thought about how improv could maybe help with that, because I did improv myself for a year and a half or so. And then I saw that you had written about this. So tell me about that correlation. And I know that you have an interest in psychology. So tell me about how that all fits together with the brain and everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. In Psychology Today, I like to sort of break the stories about academic research being done on improvisation. So the article you're referring to, I was just explaining improv study. It was the first improv research that had a control group, which is great. The research with improv is starting to be, more thorough, less variable. So it's starting to be better and better. And this particular study, they showed that just 20 minutes of improvisation compared to scripted, like just reading a script, helped people with their uncertainty tolerance. So just the feeling of being okay with not knowing what was going to happen next. An additional finding in that study was that it helped people with creativity, specifically divergent thinking. And so that makes a lot of sense, with improv, because improv to me is creativity. You have to make stuff up as you go. So a lot of studies find that it helps with creativity, but this was the first that really showed it helps with uncertainty tolerance.
That is so incredible, because it's the very first study. And this is something that we need right now. And, for those people who don't know what improv is, maybe you could explain that, and then how that relates to the switch in the brain that they were talking about.
Yeah, improvisation has a lot of different definitions. There's musical improvisation. I refer to what I talk about as theatrical improvisation. And really, some people call it comedic or like improv comedy. And it's that instead of following a script, like most of the things on TV or films, they have a script and they memorize the lines. Instead, no one knows what they're going to say next. Often you get a suggestion from the audience, and that's really to make sure, to clue the audience in that everyone's making it up, because it keeps referring back to that suggestion. So you don't need the suggestion, but it's kind of the way to say, we couldn't have rehearsed this because we're using your suggestion from the audience. And so they take the suggestion and then come up with an entire performance that's totally improvised, totally made up and spontaneous.
Well, I've done improv, and I know that when I'm in it, I need to be extremely present. And you can't really, like some people think, oh, it's comedy, so I'm going to make up a story and then insert that story into the scene. But in actuality, the best improv is when you are, like you said, making it up as you go along so that you're really engaging with the person. And it's so spontaneous that the audience is like, whoa, that just came out of no, and you can tell it's not faked. It's not planned. You know, you can tell when something's planned, and then you can tell when it's just like, whoa, that just came out of nowhere. And that's why it's so funny. That's why it's like so comedic.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things is that you're not supposed to try to be funny or creative when you're doing improv. Usually when you do that, it's not as funny. You're being sort of like a stand-up comedian. So one of the things is to really say the obvious thing that makes sense. And the other thing that you were saying is I think one of my favorite, I had been doing improv for a long time, and then I took a Keith Johnstone workshop, and he was really big on telling students that, like, we would be waiting for our turn, and he would say, I can see you have an idea, get rid of it. And so just this idea of just clearing your head, and not even that we would go and rehearse something beforehand, but just that idea of like, oh, maybe I'll say this when I go in. And even that was too pre-scripted, too premeditated. And so, that true improv where you're really just even surprising yourself at what you're saying, I think that's when those magical moments happen where it's beyond embracing uncertainty. You are just going with whatever happens, and your brain doesn't have enough space in it to be worried when you're in those flow moments. Like when you're really paying attention to the scene and just surprising yourself and saying the next thing and the next thing, there's just no brain space for, I shouldn't say this because it'll seem dumb, or, oh, they won't think that's funny. And so that's, I think, the really important part of improv that everyone can take, is that it's just figuring out how can we shift our focus from inside thinking about ourselves to just fully being present with the person that we're talking to, or our child that we're playing with, or whatever we're doing right now. I think that's the key to getting rid of that fear of the unknown and uncertainty, is just being so committed to right now. And improv does that. Like when you really learn how to improvise, you have to do that to be able to have that spontaneity.
Yeah. So we're talking about building up a tolerance for the unknown. And I mean, tell me about that, how this does that, and what can happen to actually calm you. I suppose it's a calming, maybe. Is it, when you are less afraid? Or, walk us through that if you might.
I don't think we know yet. I mean, it's hard with improv when you're studying it to remove all the different variables, because there's so many different principles at work with improv. You're saying yes to the scene partner and you're adding on. You're also listening, you're not judging, you're embracing mistakes. There's so many different parts of improv that I don't know, like we can't say yet which part makes us okay with uncertainty. It may be the whole thing. But I think one of the important parts of improv is that it feels good. Like when you're really in the zone with someone and you're surprising yourself. Like I know I always had that experience where I felt like the better version of myself, where I was way funnier and more interesting and not worried at all, and just so committed to the moment that it felt so good that I think that's the part that builds up that tolerance, is that I want to do this. Like I want more of that feeling. And so you start associating, I think, the unknown with being a good thing.
I think of it as the antithesis to anxiety, because we can't really be worrying if we're in the moment. We're having joy. We're like flowing, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's such an important thing to keep in mind right now, is that you don't have to go, I mean, you can't really go and take an improv class right now. So that's off the table. But it doesn't have to be improv or improv inspired things. I think finding activities that give you that flow feeling. Some people have it with writing or reading a good book or exercising. I'm not one of those people that finds flow with exercising, but some people do. So I think it's finding the activity that gives you that feeling of not thinking about time at all. Like time just seems to fly by, and you're absolutely not worried about anything in the future or anything in the past. I mean, those flow states are really important. For me, taking some of the ideas from improv and putting them into my everyday life helps me to have that and not be so anxious and worried. But there are so many other ways to try to do that as well, to find those flow states.
Okay, Clay went to go get his daughter so we can play some games with her.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, here's Ella.
Yes.
Yay. Well, maybe since she's here, yummy.
Got a Kinder Egg.
Do you want to play some games with us, Ella? Would this be a good time?
And then we'll eat the egg after we play one little game or two little games?
No, I'm gonna do this.
Okay, we'll play while we do this. Sure.
Okay, sure. So you work with students on improv games, and maybe there's some games that you can tell parents that they could help their children sort of build up this uncertainty tolerance. If you can do that with your child, that would be great.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the ideas in improv, one of the principles is the yes and principle. And that really just means when my scene partner or child has an idea, I go along with it. So I yes the idea. And then I have to and the idea, which means add new information to the scene. Otherwise, the scene can't get created. So you can do that. You don't have to literally say yes, but the idea is that you just go along with whatever the reality is, and then add new stuff. And you can like go on an adventure that way. So for this one, I'll start it and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Ella, we're going to the moon. Yeah? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So we can go to the moon?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think we should wear?
I know.
You don't know?
Mm-hmm.
Hats?
Mm-hmm.
Red hats?
Mm-hmm.
And then what should we do on the moon? Oh, take that out of your mouth so I can hear. What are we going to do on the moon?
I don't know. We're gonna put some things on our face.
Put some things on our face?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. We could put some things on our face like gloves.
Yeah, no, not gloves.
No. What should we put on our faces?
I think hat.
Hats on our faces?
Mm-hmm.
Like right like here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like cover our faces with hats?
Mm-hmm.
And then what else could we wear?
And then no stuff with you.
Something on our bellies?
Mm-hmm.
Like socks?
No.
No. Just shirts.
No, not good.
No. What should we wear then?
No.
Okay, well, what are we going to do on the moon before we have to come home? We only have a little bit of time and then we have to go back home. So what should we do on the moon before we go home?
I don't know.
Okay, how about we swim? Oh, no? Okay, what should we do?
I can fly up into the moon.
Yeah! I love this. And then we go home. Good story. Thank you, Ella.
Yay.
So that's the kind of ideas so for me, sometimes we're together all day, every day. So for me, sometimes I'm just not super engaged, right? Like a 40-year-old man or woman can only play so much with a child, right?
Totally.
For me, the yes and helps make it fun for me, right? Like I have fun when I'm like, oh, like my child came up with this cool thing and I went along with it, and we created this thing from nothing and we did it together. So for me, it helps me, probably more me than her, to engage and play and have fun. So that's a little game you can play. It's just like, do a story, yes and each other. Your child might not be able, depending on their age, to know about yes and, right? Like Ella said no a lot, but that's okay, right? I can be like, yeah, no, you're right. Let's do something else. And so that's the idea of that one.
And she's learning from you how to yes and as you're doing it. She's seeing you agree and turn it into something that is with her information and saying, okay, sure, let's do that. And then we'll also add this. And
Absolutely.
I'm seeing that as her exploring something that is in the moment. She's never thought of being or going to the moon ever before, possibly. And even if she did in this moment, there's things that are just popping up in her mind. Mm-hmm. And so that, to me, that unknown is that practice with the unknown is being stimulated as she's coming up with things, and she's not even realizing it. But it's just like, oh, well, I have this idea. And then it's confirmed that it's a good idea when you say yes and da 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 da. And so then it feeds that, that willingness to not be so critical of ourselves and to be like trusting that moment, I'm thinking.
Absolutely. I think it's so important, because kids, especially 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, hear no a lot. Sometimes they need to hear that because we're in charge of keeping them alive and safe and healthy. But I've learned, because of thinking about improv, that I often say no because I want to avoid messes and her struggling, her getting frustrated. So early on, when I realized that, I had to fight that and say yes anyway, and let her struggle and let her make messes. And it's just empowering. And then when I say no, it has more weight to it because I'm not saying no to things I don't need to say no to. So we end up collaborating better. It's, for me, a lot about collaboration. But you're right. It's also about that idea of not suppressing her creativity, because unfortunately, once a lot of kids go to school, they're told no in some way or another a lot. Like, you'll never be able to do this. It's too hard to do that. And I think adults don't often mean to do that, but creative suppression is a real thing and it still happens to me. If somebody looks at my writing and says like, this is awful or this makes no sense, I'm not going to stop writing, but like, it still makes me pause, right? It's still sort of,
it's deflating.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely want to avoid that, creative suppression with her. And just now is especially the time to just yes, more ideas, the better. And for her to see that collaboration is fun. It's also kind of sharing, right? She's learning how to share ideas instead of saying, no, we're going to the moon, we're doing this, this, and this, and I don't care what you think. She's learning how to share creatively, which I think is important.
Mm-hmm. I see one more thing that I think is what parents might want to think about with this. And I don't know, I didn't read this in the article, but when we're doing that yes and we're building that trust, it's almost like creating emotional safety for the child too.
Yeah, for risk taking. I think it's really important that I can have an idea, it can be wacky, and you're going to go along with it. I know for me, that was a great feeling that I didn't really have until I was 20 years old and discovered improv. Maybe I had it a little bit. So I just think it's a really valuable parenting skill as well, to be able to go along with it, learn how to play together. Because I know when she's just playing her way and is not listening to what I'm doing or saying at all, and it's like, this is how we have to play, it's not fun for me, right? So I don't have an in, like I can't really fake it. And she is the same with me. If I say, we're going to play this game by the rules, It's not fun for her.
Hey, Dad.
So this is our way to figure out, like, what is our relationship? How do we figure out how we play together?
I'm wondering about what happens in the brain. If you can walk us through when we go into that improv state, there's a shift in the brain, right?
Today.
Yeah, there is some neuroscience evidence. So there's neuroscientist Charles Lim, who's done some brain scans on improvisers. So his first one was with jazz musicians in fMRIs, and then rappers.
Today.
And he still hasn't released the findings on the ones with comedic improvisers.
Okay.
But so far, it seems like all the different types of improv affect the brain
Wait,
similarly.
Dad.
Yeah, you can put it on. And it's that the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex decreases in activity, and the medial prefrontal cortex increases. There's many other things going on as well. But for me, as a non-scientist, this is sort of the simplified version of it. And the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex has been linked with like your inner monologue, your sort of inner critic or judge.
Oh.
And the medial prefrontal cortex is linked with creativity, sort of like verbal creativity. So for me, it makes sense as almost a metaphor, like as an easy way to think about what improv does in the brain is it quiets the inner judge and critic, and it increases activity in creativity centers in the brain. And I like that, you know, there used to be this left brain, right brain idea, which has kind of been debunked at this point. But it's a nice metaphor, right? So yes, it's much more complex, and there'll be more studies and scans on it, I hope, in the future. But I just love how that, to me, sums it up, is that it quiets this part of the brain and enhances this other part.
Mhm.
Oh, no, you can put it on my
I love
arm.
that. And, you know, since there is that actual research and we know that, it's sort of like saying, if we're going to take care of our well-being, which includes our mental health, then we might have like a workout of play. Oh, like literally, let's schedule in a workout to stay healthy, you know, mentally healthy, and play, or just put it into your life. Do you have any thoughts on that? How we can put it into our lives?
Absolutely. I think it's really important to do that for kids, for grown-ups. I do think it really helps with anxiety and worry, and you know, there's been studies with depression. So for me, I do it with these exercises that I've created that are based on improv and acting exercises. And I do them just as I'm going about my day. One of my favorites, I call it like you seize it. And it's that exercise where you just get to the improv rehearsal and you're just walking around the room, and you point to something and just say what it is. So I'd be like, chair, pillow, plant. And as you do that, you're just becoming more mindful of what's really going on around you. And that helps you to not be thinking about where you were before rehearsal started. So I do this when I'm just walking around and I can feel the thoughts just like cycling and cycling over and over. What's school going to look like in September? What am I going to do to entertain, right? And it's just too much and it's not productive. So then I just start pointing and saying what things are. And if I do that for about 15 seconds, it really sort of breaks that cycle of overthinking. And then if it starts again, I just do it again. And then you can just call things the wrong name, and that helps with sort of like creativity. So point to the plant and call it a chair, point to a lamp and call it a hat. And so that sort of breaks that overthinking cycle as well for me. So I've just taken these games and I just try to like do them without being in a rehearsal space.
So you can do that for yourself, but then I'm imagining that any parent can also do that with their kids. They can go for a walk and start saying, pointing and doing things in the wrong way. And then whatever age it'll make their child laugh, or at least go, no, that's so silly, or, you know, something, but taking them into that play state where it's like, we're just playing around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to find the game with her. There's the improv idea of trying to find the game of the scene. And that's just figuring out what is the fun pattern that's emerging that we can play around with until it gets really silly. And we've come up with so many games that are unique to the two of us because I'm looking for the game.
And with parents home with their children, like 24/7, some of us now, that's going to be so useful. Well, this is so amazingly helpful just to see how we can shift ourselves and our children in this playful area. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us that you think is important to know, or, some of the places that you can direct us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to continue writing about the applications of improv on the Psychology Today blog. The book comes out in January. It has 120 games in it that people can play during all this global pandemic election chaos, because I just think it's so important that thinking about things that seem really overwhelming and out of our control isn't going to make those things controllable. So if I'm thinking about the pandemic and the future and, it's not helpful, right? A little bit is fine. I have to figure out what's safe for my family. Obviously, it's good to think a little bit, but then you have to call it, right? And find a way that you can break out of that. So I think improv exercises that you can do every day without anyone else around, for me, is a really good way to just break that cycle. Like, there's no point in thinking about this all day. It's going to make me feel worse and not better, because there's still amazing things going on. And your child is only going to be that age right now, and then that's it. So just because there's all this chaos going on in the world doesn't mean you should miss out on the amazing development that's happening with your child right now.
That just puts me in a whole different perspective of visualizing how we can spend this pandemic time with our child, playing more, not so much worry and more play. That sounds so amazingly like a big shift in how I think a lot of parents might see this time with their kids.
And academics will come, because I think I'm hearing a lot about people are worried about students falling behind on the academics. I'm much more focused on social and emotional development. And a lot of that kids are going to get through playing, through connecting, through collaborating, creativity. So I'm not so worried about we're all going to fall behind on academics. I think what's going to be really problematic is if our mental health suffers.
But this could be a totally different generation that has much more social, emotional connection to themselves and each other based on this time that we can utilize really to build that.
And just enjoy the simplicity that we're all sort of forced to have, instead of seeing your parent worry all the time and detach from you. Like, this could be a time where we connect more than ever and enjoy just the simplest everyday things, and a walk down the street.
I love that. Well, remind us the name of your book again.
Sure. Play Your Way Sane.
Okay. And so we will put the links for that in below so people can find that. And thank you so much for being here. Where are you guys zooming off to now? Are you going to go do something or stay at home? What's going on?
I'm hoping we jump in the kiddie pool next because it's pretty hot.
That sounds awesome. Thanks so much. It's so nice to meet you all the way across the world or the country.
Thank you so much.
All right. See you.
Bye.
That was so fun. Something we can do with our kids and for ourselves to calm us and make us get really present, right? So Dr. Clay's book will be coming out soon. We will let you know when that happens. And for now, you can actually pre-order it. So go to the Maui Mama Magazine Facebook page and you'll see that link below there. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope that now, with all these tools, you can embrace uncertainty a little bit better. I know that I can. And I want to leave you with a little taste of that wellness experience from Maui Sound Healing. So for now, be safe and be well. Aloha.